Hello everyone, my name is Rahul Joshi and welcome to my YouTube channel Selenium Easy with Rahul. So as we already had discussed that locators are the way to uniquely identify a HTML element on a web page and to interact with the web elements to achieve certain operations like click, enter text, get text, etc. So today we are going to discuss on one of the crucial topic that is locator preferences. So when you are learning Selenium, then there is a question that often comes up in your mind, that is, what are the best practices to use when choosing a locator for an element? So we are going to discuss about the best practices on locators identification so that you can identify the objects uniquely and correctly. So let's start the session. Preference number one is ID. So whenever you are identifying an object and if ID as an attribute is available, just use it. So if I talk about ID, then it is the most common way of identifying elements on a web page. The ID is one of the fastest and unique ways of locating web elements and is considered as one of the most fastest and reliable methods for determining an element. And in 80 to 90% cases, ID is a unique attribute and its value do not change. So this is the example that shows the element in DOM tree containing tags and attributes, which we already had discussed in the previous session. Please watch it if you didn't watch the session yet. And if you see here, we have the button as a tag and we have so many attributes related to it, out of which we have the ID as an attribute having some value, right? And the Selenium command to achieve the automation is driver.find element. Then we need to write by.id, then the value of the ID attribute. So in this way, we can achieve automation, right? And if I talk about the Selenium command, we will also discuss that in our next sessions. So do not worry at all. So let's see the live example, like how we are going to identify the objects and how to visualize if there is any ID available as an attribute in the application. So the sample application that I am using is the Facebook, right? If I can open it for you. So yeah, so this is the Facebook page, right? Let's right click on it and click on the inspect button, and that we already had discussed, right? How to identify the objects or how to inspect the elements. So here for the email address text box, we have the input as a tag and we have so many attributes and we have the ID is equal to email as well. So simply copy it, use it in your Selenium script, right? And if I can see the password, right? So we have, if you see here, we have input type is equal to password, class, name, and we have ID is equal to pass. So simply copy it and use in the Selenium script, right? So what we need to write, driver.find element by.id, then its value, right? And we can perform so many operations. Okay, then that we will discuss maybe in the later sessions. Let's see the other elements like login button. So do we have ID? Yes, we have ID for the login button as well. So that is good actually. If I click on the forgotten password, so in the forgotten password link, we do not have any ID, right? We have only the href as an attribute and we have a text as well, but there is no ID at all, right? So if so, we clearly see that the email address, password, and the login button have the ID as an attribute, and we can use that in our Selenium script, right? So that is it from the ID perspective. Preference number two is to identify the objects via name. A web page can have multiple elements with the same name attribute. So if we are going to use the name attribute for the identification of a web element, just make ensure that the name attribute must contain a unique value, right? If multiple elements have the same name or same value of the name attribute, then Selenium will just select the first value in the page which matches the search criteria. So again, as an example, this is a part of a DOM tree, right? So here again, we have a button tag and we have so many attributes. And if I showcase you, we have a name attribute as well, having the value as login. So the Selenium command to write a script is like driver.find element. Then instead of ID, right? If you see it is written like by dot name, then the value of the name attribute, that is login. So preference number three is to identify the objects via link text. And we can only use link text for elements containing the anchor tags, right? Again, there is one point to remember that I already, communicated you. That is, if multiple hyperlinks with the same text are present on the page, then Selenium will always choose the first one, right? And the main difference between the link text and the partial link text is that link text matches the exact text inside the anchor tag, while accessing links using a portion of the text is done by the partial text. So if I give you an example, so this is the HTML code snippet in which we have the tags and attributes. So in this case, we have A as a tag and we have the attribute as href. And I already mentioned, right? So in between the tags, that is the start tag and the end tag, there exists a text. So in this case, we have a forgotten password question mark as a text. So the Selenium command to use the link text is driver.find element. Then we have to write by.link text. Then in the brackets, we need to write the value of the text. Here in this case, the value of the text is forgotten password question mark. So if you have noticed here, this is the carbon copy or the complete text we need to mention over here. But in case of partial text, there is a possibility in which we can use a partial text, or I can say the subtext. So here in the example, we need to write driver.find element, then by.partial link text. In the brackets, we need to write the partial text value. That is, in this case, we just take a subtext as forgotten, right? So you can also take password question mark if you want to use the partial text, right? So I hope the difference between the link text and partial text is clear. Moving to the next slide. So the preference number 4 is to identify the objects via XPath, which is one of the crucial one and my favorite as well. So XPath in Selenium is an XML path used for navigation through the structure of the page, right? If I talk about the syntax, then I can say double slash, which refers to the selection of the current node. Then we need to write tag name. Then in the square brackets, we can write at the rate attribute name is equal to its value. So let's take the example. Here, if you want to identify the XPath, then you need to put double slash. And the tag name here in this case is the button. So we can write button. And in the square brackets, you need to write at the rate, then attribute name. So you can take any attribute. And for this example, I use ID as an attribute. So I write at the rate ID and then is equal to its value. So you can also take class as well here, like you can write double slash button. In the square brackets, you can write at the rate class is equal to then this value, right? So in this way, we are going to create the XPath. And in the next session, actually, I'm preparing one more session in which we are going to discuss in detail about the XPaths. So just wait for it. Okay. So let's discuss about the types of XPath. So this is one of the very crucial topic because generally interviewer asks this question, like what are the types of XPath? So there are two types of XPath. One is the absolute XPath and one is the relative XPath. So the main difference actually, if I talk about the absolute XPath has the complete path beginning from the root to the element which we want to identify. The drawback with the absolute XPath is that there is any change in the attributes beginning from the root to the element, our absolute XPath will becomes invalid, right? And if I talk about the relative XPath, then it starts by referring to the element that we want to identify and not from the root node. Okay, and it is mainly used for automation since even if an element is removed or added in the DOM, the relative XPath is not impacted at all. Okay, so relative XPath is always preferred as it is not complete path from the root element. Okay, so I'm going to give you a demo on the absolute and relative XPath. So let me open the Chrome browser, and this is the application on which I will show you the demo. So in order to identify the object, just press the Control Shift and J button from the keyboard. Click on the Elements tab, click on the Inspect button, and click on the element that you want to inspect. So I just click on the email address text box. So in this case, we know that, right, we have the input as a tag here, and we have so many attributes for the email text box, right? Now, if I have to give an example about the absolute and relative XPath, just right click on this element in the DOM tree. You will find an option as copy. Just hover over it. And at the end, you will find two options. One is the copy XPath, one is the copy full XPath. So copy XPath means to copy the relative XPath, and copy full XPath means copy the absolute XPath. So I'm just clicking on the copy the full XPath. So this is the absolute XPath that was calculated. So if you have noticed that it started with the HTML tag, and here we have the body and so on, right? So it traversed from the HTML to the input tag, which is the ultimate goal, right? So the drawback is like if any of the tag, if it is being removed by the developers, then your XPath will be miscalculated. So let me copy this again, right? And just again, I'm going to the DOM tree, press the Control F button from the keyboard and paste the absolute XPath here. So you have noticed that something is highlighted here, right? So that means it is able to identify the object here in the DOM tree. Secondly, you also need to see like here it is written as one of one. One of one means that there is only one object that was identified and it is distinct, right? There is no other object with the same property, right? So this is all about absolute XPath. As I mentioned, the drawback is like if any of the tag is, if suppose developer remove any of the tag, let me remove it, then you will see, right, there is no object that was identified with this absolute XPath, right? So it is not recommended to use the absolute XPath. Moving to the next point, again, I'm right clicking here. Again, I'm clicking on the copy button. Here, just copy on the copy XPath. I'm just pasting it again in the notepad file. And you have noticed, right? It is very compact one. This is a relative XPath. We already had discussed about the syntax, that is double slash, then the tag name. In this case, it is automatically showing a star. That means any of the tag, right? Then we have the @ID, that is the tag name, sorry, the attribute name, and is equal to email. So let me copy it and let me paste here. Let me search here. So if you see it is highlighted, that means it is able to identify the element here. And one of one means that it is a unique and distinct one. Lastly, there is one point to remember. That is, I already told you that if you want to copy the XPath, you need to right click here and you need to click on the copy button. And you have the option as copy XPath, right? Through which you are going to copy the relative XPath. But I have found that when you use this technique, so many times the object calculated from copy XPath, you are not getting the distinct object, right? And even if you are getting the distinct object, it might get failed in the future releases or at the future stages. So better to be cautious while you are copying the element from this technique. So the preference number 5 is to locate the element via CSS selector. So if I talk about CSS selector and Selenium, so these are the string patterns used to identify an element based on the combination of HTML tags, IDs, class, and attributes, right? So if I talk about the syntax, then we have to write CSS is equal to tag name, then hash ID if ID is available, right? And we can discuss in the next sessions as well, like how to identify the elements via CSS if we have only the class attribute or we have some other attributes. Okay. So till now, I hope that it is all clear, like about the preferences of identifying the elements. So again, preference number 1, ID, preference number 2 by name, preference number 3 by link text or partial link text, preference number 4, XPath, the preference number 5 is the CSS selector. So that is it from the today's session. Please post me the queries on my Facebook page or my YouTube channel. That is Selenium Easy with Rahul. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you so much.